Welcome to Covenant, the first day of session 4. And what is a covenant? You might be asking, or maybe you know, a covenant is a contract between you and your wife before God that gives you the safety in your marriage to grow and learn and heal and have a life together.
Covenant's such a fancy word for a promise with a marker, right?
A promise with a marker.
Well, like a promise with something that symbolizes something important.
Yeah. As we were talking about covenant, Pam said to me, it just feels so legalistic. It just feels cold and calculated and not
dated.
But the Bible's dated and it's still all true, and we stick to it. But the beauty of the covenant is, again, we see these parallels over and over and over. Jesus had a covenant with the Jews, and that was the beginning of the Jewish nation, and Christianity comes out of that. And so a covenant is a beautiful thing. It is the commitment that gives us the safety that we all desire in a marriage and in a relationship. And so, part of a covenant is also understanding the costs. So if an example of a covenant is a contract. So if you were to buy a home or buy a car, you're going to look at the details of that contract to say, am I willing to make that monthly payment? Right? And so in our marriage, we also need to look at it the same way. If we're coming into our marriage thinking, well, what I'm bringing to the marriage is me, take it or leave it. And as long as you give me the things I need in return, then that's our covenant. That's not really the covenant that the Bible is calling us to in a healthy, God-centric marriage. When we look at a covenant and a contract and we think about considering the costs of that contract, we have to look outside just even our own marriage and that relationship. And it's why our primary aim at 3 for 3 Marriage is a thriving, lifelong marriage legacy. And, for me personally, I saw the impact of a contract that was broken in my case. And I'm sure I'm not alone if you're watching this, but for me, I was 16 and I came home and I lived kind of poor. I think I shared earlier, but I came home and there was a note from my mom that she took my sister and left, and because she wasn't happy with my father. And it was really, really difficult moment for me. I was shouting out the window, crying, But all the tears aside, that's what's at stake. That's why we're asking you to lean into your marriage, to make this the most important thing you're ever going to do in your life. It is more important than your career. It's more important than your fantasy football team score. It's more important than the amount of shoes you have or the purses you have or the car you drive or the house you live in. And that's why this is the most important thing, that ripple effect that affects you, your spouse, your potential children, your family. And I don't want any of you watching this film to have a child who does a marriage video and cries on it in front of other people. Again, using this contrast, what does the world offer us? In marriage, the world says a marriage is something that's about convenience versus covenant. So we want to consider the costs and know that before we go into our marriage. You've probably seen people who, in that experience where the marriage isn't strong because they're talking about what they're getting out of it or what it's taking from them. And it's not a balanced equation. So a marriage covenant, I was trying to think of a good example, Pamela, because I like my analogies. So a marriage covenant is a bit like if you and your fiance said, we're going to go live off the land and we're going to move out to some remote area and we're going to buy a plot of land and we're going to fence it off, and that's the land we own and that's all we can live off.
Right. Is
that plot of land. That's going to give us the material to make clothes and shade and wood in the winter and food to eat. That's what our marriage covenant is. We're agreeing to the area in which we're going to live our lives, enrich our lives, survive. And the truth is, and we've all seen it probably in other married couples we know, is you've seen people's field who's it's dry. It's kind of dead and they're suffering. They still own the field.
Yeah. They're
still married. They're committed to the covenant. And I respect that. I respect people who honor that commitment and that covenant, but there's no reason not to have a field that has all your favorite veggies and fruits and a beautiful tree that you can sit in the summer and a tree that you can use the wood for to build a house and to warm your hearth. So that's what, if you think of your marriage and that commitment to a field, what are you going to grow in that field? What effort are you going to put? Are you going to spend time pulling weeds? Right? That's how we want you to think about your marriage and this concept of a covenant. you're going to learn about that in the session. What does the Bible say about a covenant? How does it work in our marriage? What does it take of us? And this is going to enrich you and empower you to have the foundation for a thriving lifelong marriage. So to wrap things up, the exercise we have after you go through some of this learning is we're going to have you look at a classic wedding vow and talk through together what are the easy parts and what are the hard parts for you, based on your history, your family of origin, your prior romantic relationships, and do some talking. We'll see you next time.